Good morning. Today is the 8th day of Tammuz, the 13th. 13th? 13th of July? 14th of July? Is it Bastille Day?
14th.
14th of July. It's Bastille Day. Good. The French can do whatever they want. And we are up to the middle of the 7th, toward the ends of the 7th chapter of Shoresh Mitzvah Tefillah. And now we're coming to the question I told you he's going to come to. It's an age-old question. Unfortunately, I think it's a mistake. I think they should have taken it out. There were all kinds of tefillos written by people who didn't 100% know. These are later tefillos. These are things from the Middle Ages, from the late Middle Ages, from the modern era even, who didn't necessarily know everything.
Right.
And they used wording that is at least on the surface not appropriate. And here he brings the whole discussion here in parentheses. And he also says it should have been amended. He also says, he comes to the same conclusion. And he says, remember we were talking about whether we can ever address the spheros themselves, right? And we said not, because they're only created vessels or created instruments, and they're just the instrument.
Yeah.
So it would be like a person telling the mailman brings him a bill, a big bill, and he has to pay it, so he punches him in the face. Right? What do you want from the mailman? The mailman's only the guy who delivers it. Or conversely, the mailman brings him a big check that he got, and he kisses the mailman. I love you. Maybe it's a normal reaction, but it's got nothing to do with reality. He says there's a perush on most of the Shas called Korban Nesanel. It's at the end of every volume of Shas, and there at the end of Rosh Hashanah, the end of the first chapter, Al Charuz sheomrim b'neilat Yom Kippurim. There's a slicha. We say slichos on Yom Kippur. Only in Ne'ilah though. Ne'ilah. Only in the last.
Right.
So we have a whole series of kinos, not kinos, slichos. And one of them says, Midat rachamim aleinu itgalgeli ulifnei konech tchinatenu hapili. The measure of compassion, roll yourself upon us, which means come upon us, and before your Creator, beseech, or your beseech what you're asking. Umidika'amar lifnei konech, and the fact that you mention before your Creator. So if it wouldn't have said before your Creator, so you could get away and say, we don't mean the measure of mercy and compassion itself separate from God. We mean the measure of compassion in God. But the fact that it's like, again, telling the mailman, please go back.
I didn't catch the Duke. I didn't catch it in
the translation. We're asking the measure of compassion to go back to its Creator and ask for mercy upon us. So that would be like telling the mailman, look, I don't like the letter you gave me. Go back to the post office, ask them for a better letter. If it would have just been the measure of mercy, may you come upon us. So you could get away with saying, I'm saying the measure of compassion in God. But you can't say both sides of the equation.
No.
It's you and go back to your Creator. Because he says go back before your Creator, so he's placing something in between us and the Creator. And this is forbidden, as we said. And what the Korban Nesanel, what this parish on Shas, on Rosh Hashanah says, is correct. It says, in my humble opinion, the right wording should have been amended, should have said, the Master of compassion, may you bring upon us your measure of compassion. And that's it. So that's the answer there. And again, in the end, I believe it wasn't amended. Maybe I'm not sure if in our Siddur, in the Chabad Siddur, they took it out, this particular statement. Because it's a long piece of liturgy. I don't remember if they took it out or not. In any case, it definitely has a problem. You can't say that. But what we began with this chapter, we said that we're not answered because we don't know which name to call God. So that's okay. So now we're getting into a whole new topic. He says there are names that are Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton, but in the Shmoneh Esrei, each one of the blessings, you think of the Yud Kei Vav Kei with a different nikud, with a different vowelization. Each one of the blessings, each one of the middle 12, has a different vowelization of Yud Kei Vav Kei. And this is all topic we're probably not going to get into very deeply here. It just says that each one of the Sfirot has a name associated with it, like Kel in Chesed and Elokim in Gvura. It also has a Yud Kei Vav Kei with a certain vowelization associated with it. So that's not exactly a connotation because it's the essential name of God. It's Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's the Tetragrammaton. But still, it's not exactly a name.
An aspect, yes.
It's an aspect of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yes. It's like saying, so in the Arizal, in regular Kabbalah, if somebody is davening by the Arizal's Kavanos, and if you look at the Alter Rebbe's original Siddur, you'll see that in Ashrei he does this. There's 10 mentions of Yud Kei Vav Kei in Ashrei, in that chapter that we say, 146, 145, that we say every day. So in the morning, he has each one of the Yud Kei Vav Keis with a vowelization. He put it into the Siddur. They didn't put it into Tehilas Hashem because I don't know. I don't know what the reason was. I don't want to say stop. So anyway, so he says, so doing that, and in Atah Chonen, L'Adam Da'at, when the first blessing of the Amidah, that we're praying for Hashem to give us Da'at, to give us consciousness, then the Havaya that you have in mind is a Havaya with a Patach. The Patach is just a line, right? Straight line. So all the letters have a Patach on them. So it's like Yud with a Patach, Hey with a Patach, Vav with a Patach, Hey with a Patach. And Patach, each one of the vowels is connected to a sphera. It's associated with a sphera. So maybe I'll show you later, but in the Tehilas Hashem, they actually subtly wrote what the correspondence is. They didn't write it out like openly because they didn't want to, but they in a subtle form they wrote it on the first page.
At the beginning, you mean
right, where it shows the vowels. They're in order. They're actually in order from Chochma to Yesod. And Chochma is Patach. Patach is to open, and that's considered to be the opening is always Chochma. V'gilui. V'chochma Reshita Gilui. It's the first opening, it's the first revelation. The Chochma is the beginning of revelation. When you have this in mind, it's not called calling out to a sphera. Because you're using a name. You just have a name with a certain vowelization. Anybody who has this in mind has Hashem in mind. He doesn't have the sphera in mind because even a lot of people who do this don't even know that Patach is Chochma. Like they wouldn't even know. They would just know this is Yud Kei Vav Kei with a special vowelization. שהוא הנקרא בשם הוויה בניקוד פתח שמתלבש ברינת חוכמה להשפיע חוכמה באביה, כמה אותה חונן לאדם דת. So he's just repeating what I just explained. ואחו, אם לא על ידי כלי החוכמה, האצילות שהאונסוף מתלבש בה משפיע על ידי חוכמה בכל עולם האצילות. In the beginning of Revelation, like we said, is the wisdom of the world of Atzilus, of emanation, and there the infinite light first encloses itself, and that's how it brings the revelation of God into the world of emanation. ואחר כך, מלביש השפעתו על ידי חוכמה דבייה, להשפיע חוכמה בגן עדן עד שמשפיע גם בעולם הזה. And there's a whole succession of חוכמה through the world, from Atilus to Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, all the way down to our world, and that's how it brings the wisdom down into our world. והרי החוכמה דאביה היא רק כגרזן ביד החוצב בו לאור אינסוף המשפיע על ידה. So here he uses another parable that we've used as a metaphor, that the wisdom here is like the axe in the hand of the person who's chopping down a tree. It's an instrument, and you don't even see it as a separate instrument. You see it in his hand and as he's doing it. That's the image that the person has. He doesn't have an image of an axe doing something.
Thing, yes.
And when God is giving us wisdom, so then we say he is wise in wisdom. Right? Wise means that he is wise, and he's showing his wisdom, but it's relating back to him. ועל זה מורה השם הוויה בניקוד פתח, ונמצא כשאומר ברוך אתה השם חונן הדעת, ומכוון שם הוויה בניקוד פתח, הוא קורא אליו יתברך ממש. So we find that when you use these kavanos, these intentions, when you daven, you're calling out to God. And that's what it means to use a name, to know the name when you're calling out to God. So the way that most of the Kabbalists do this, again, this is a lot of discussion like in Kabbalah, because in Chassidus nobody does this. No Chassid would ever have this intent, except I said that in the Alter Rebbe in Ashrei he had this, but not in the Amida. In the Amida he never put this in. He said these kavanos they're not for a regular person. But the Kabbalists, when they do this, they never utter the name. You're not allowed to vowelize Yud Kei Vav Kei. You're not allowed to utter it. So they have it in their mind. It's in their mind anyway. So what you're saying is Adni, right? You're calling Hashem by his name, and you have this in mind. So the only intent the person has in mind is that I'm thinking of God as he is enclosed within his wisdom. Because this is what you need to have in mind. Again, this is all based on this medrash. It says, why do Israel call out and they're not answered? Because they don't know the name to have in mind. So now he knows the name to have in mind. And so for the first blessing, to receive that, to receive consciousness, he needs to have this name in mind. Again, if he's davening according to the intentions of Kabbalah, if he's not, it doesn't even matter. Because what's the main thing? The main thing is I'm asking God for consciousness. That's the main thing. I know the name, don't know the name. So one medrash says if you don't know the name, it doesn't work. Okay, there's other medrashim that says you don't need to know. מה שאין כן, אם יכוון באתה חונן בשם הוויה וניגוד סגול, שמורה על מהותו ועצמותו יתברך שמולבש בכלי החסד, להשפיע החסד בעולם, הרי אז אין דרך לבקשתו. So now he solves our problem, and he says, if a person knows intentions, he knows them, and he mixes them up, then it doesn't work. It's not that if you don't know it at all. If you don't know it at all, you don't know it. So you're calling it to God. Yeah. But if you think, instead of Havaya with Patach, you think about Segol. Segol is the one that's Chesed, that's related to Chesed. So if you do that...
I'm just curious. What is a Segol? What, is there any...
Oh, wow.
I'm just curious.
I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Patach is easy. The Segol...
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Never thought of it. It's an order. The order is very simple. When you look at the order, it's very clear. But you know that the order of the letters is the order that we know. So we know from King David. King David is the first one who wrote us an acrostic.
An acrostic, really?
Yeah. He's the first one. No, it's chapter 25.
Really? I have to look.
That's the first acrostic in the entire Tanakh. No, not just in literature.
The entire Tanakh?
It's the first person. After that, Yirmiyahu does it and others do it. But he was the first one chronologically.
I didn't know that.
I've never seen an acrostic before King David. So King David didn't make it up. Apparently, he just wrote down. He was just a poet, so he thought of this idea.
But Tanakh has.
There's no other earlier source that I know of.
Nothing in the Torah.
No, nowhere. So it's a very interesting thing. Like,
that's cool, because that's really the.
That's a big question.
Yeah.
So he's the first one who used it, but it's apparently not from him. He didn't invent it.
No, he didn't write it.
In any case, so that's for me the Segol. Why is Segol Chesed? Because you could say the Chesed is written with two Segols, but I don't think that's the reason. In any case, הרי אז אין דרך לבקשתו, שהרי על ידי כלי הנ"ל אין אור אינסוף משפיע חוכמה. So if he uses a segel instead of the patach, because he's using the wrong intention, then he's not bringing down the wisdom. והגם שביד האור אינסוף המלובש בחסד להתלבש בחוכמה להשפיע לזה. And this is even though for Hashem it doesn't really matter. He could take the instrument of chesed that you just called upon, as it were. He said, here, use this. I'm giving you an instrument. Hashem could use that instrument for anything. He's all powerful, so he could change it. So, what's the idea here? The idea, and why is it not so popular today? Because in the end, today, people are not so protocol-oriented. This had a lot of appeal to people a long time ago, let's say 200 years ago, when the world was still very much in the protocol. That there was a way you approached the king, there was what you said.
Formal in that
everything was much more formal. Yeah. So because today everything is much more free-flowing, this whole thing doesn't... prayer has to in some way represent the way that we conduct ourselves. It has to be... in the end, prayer is talking to God. So if someone is forcing you to do something that is so foreign to you that you don't know what you're doing, it's not prayer. You're putting on an act. Mm-hmm. And that was a lot of the reasoning of why not to do the Kabbalistic intentions. Because they were good for their time, because that's the way people thought, that's the way they lived, that's the way they saw the world. Everything was protocol, everything was formal, and slowly as time passed on and things became less formal, so we have some formality. I mean, we use the same wording, the same liturgy that was written 2,500 years ago, but that's where we stay with it. That's all we need. Okay, so let's stop here. And God willing, we'll finish chapter 7 tomorrow.